So, on today,
Today.
we are going to discuss discipline as it pertains to our lives as a whole. Very particularly, we will be headed in the direction of discipline with children because guess what? We have both been children and
We got children.
we have children.
Oh my goodness. This is definitely a topic that has been heavy on the surface lately for me and family members and such.
Yeah,
And it's an interesting question
it is.
or issue.
Yeah.
How to do it, when to do it.
When to do it.
Yeah.
So I want to start with, because I love etymology. I just want to start with the definition, right? The definition of discipline. So discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules or code of behavior they use the word punishment. So using punishment to correct disobedience. That's what the word discipline means, right? And then also it can be used to mean a branch of knowledge typically studied in higher education, and also to train someone to obey rules or a code of behavior. Now the word punishment, to start off, I would like to replace that word with consistency. So
Yes.
To the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using consistency to correct disobedience.
I like that change. I like that change a lot. I think especially because discipline is something that has evolved, like the forms of it and how it's, whether or not it's appropriate or accepted or even the legality of it is evolved over time.
Right.
So the definition itself, I think, should reflect that evolution to where we hopefully are today,
Yes. Yeah. Because I think even the word, the connotation for me is negative, because I feel like the people that use the word, they use it. It's not everybody that uses the word, but a lot of times, especially when it's dealing with children, it's used in almost like it has a connotation of like anger in dealing with the child.
It's very punitive. It's very like, you are in trouble now. I am going to discipline you because you have been bad.
Yeah.
And you ain't gonna like it, and it's
gonna be
you
ugly
get it right
and terrible. Or you hear somebody saying that's because they don't discipline your child, or if you discipline your child, da 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 da. And I feel like that needs to be addressed. I think we need to, as a society, just reevaluate how we are promoting good behavior, healthy behavior in our children. And a lot of times we got to look at ourselves and look at the way that we were raised as well.
Oh yeah.
Because honey,
I remember thinking to myself before I ever even had kids, when I was still being disciplined myself, I used to think like, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to spank my kids. I'm never going to ground them. And I definitely won't do any of these things like angry, And, I think, there's some things on that I've changed positions on, obviously. But the one thing that remains for sure is that none of those things, no punishment that I'm doling out, I hate to say punishment, correction.
Right, correction.
Because I don't like to think that I don't even think my kids would describe it as like a punishment. It's more like
consequences.
Exactly, exactly. They just know mommy said this, and if I do this, then this is going to happen. And I knew that going in. So now I'm just paying the piper. But I find that like my thing is to really always make sure that I don't do it in anger.
Yes.
That they feel my love through it, regardless of what is going down. Like, that they know mommy loves them. Like, I remember my aunt laughing at my mom, because my mom is from Guyana. And for all my Caribbean folk out there, y'all know how punishment can be. it can, you can get licks now. You can get licks, and you can get licks for a long time. It don't matter that you're 13, 14, none of them things. You can catch it. But I think the thing that was funny about my mom, and that some of my aunts used to laugh at her, is that she would pop us. We would catch licks, but she would hug us immediately afterward. They say you can't beat them and hug them at the same time. My mom was like, no, because I'm not angry with them. It's that I'm trying to teach them something, but I'm not. Those are my babies. I don't like seeing them cry. I don't like to, when I'm popping them, my hand feels it. Like I know that it hurt and it stung. And so I find, although I don't do a lot of the popping, it is so important for me that they know that I love them and that I'm not angry at them. It's a behavior that I'm identifying as problematic.
Exactly. I think that's really important, because anger is not an effective method for discipline. No. And I learned early on with Farai, with my son, when I was researching, because he tests on the Asperger's syndrome, right? Or spectrum. And early on, when I realized that there was something that I had to approach differently with him, just in teaching him in general. I can't remember what I read, but it impressed in me the importance of, number one, making sure that when his behavior was wrong, to not express anger in my response to him, because it wouldn't register correctly with him.
Right.
And I think that happens with a lot of children. What we don't realize sometimes as parents is how much power we have and how much they look at us. And so if we're angry, sometimes they're not even registering what they did wrong, especially when you're angry, you're not telling them exactly what the behavior was that is causing the disruption. You're saying, don't do that. I don't understand why you did that. Why you always do that? That what? But all they can see is that you are angry.
Right.
And for them, it's not teaching them a lesson other than, like, everything I just did may have been the thing that made them angry. And I don't know how to sidestep that. And so it creates an anxiety.
Yes.
Or it can go in the opposite direction. They're like, well, I don't know. It seemed like everything I do is wrong, so I might as well just go ahead and do it,
You're always yelling.
So you're always yelling. So I think that's important for us to remember. And it's not like, I'm not perfect. There are times when I have to go back and apologize because for whatever else was going on, I was frustrated already. I was whatever. And then on top of that, I respond to him in a way that's not appropriate. It's just not appropriate.
It happens. Yeah, we're totally human. I think that's also the part of discipline that people miss, is that also through discipline in the not directed at our children, but through our self-discipline, we are showing them the point of it all.
This is the point. And if if we're not disciplined ourselves, they're like, well, what's the point? What's the
point? Exactly.
Going through all that.
And to show them that, like, if I speak in a way, or I get angry and I snatch something from you that I didn't want you to have, or whatever it may be, I think I did
the above.
Yeah, girl, I think just yesterday I slammed the door, and not hard, but I was mad, and I came in my room and I let the door fly. And for a second I was like, and then I was just like, Danielle, because for a fact, if that 14-year-old child went and slammed his door,
you would be coming for them.
Girl, I'll take that door right off the hinge. So now you don't have a door, okay?
Oh, there's no door to slam.
Have a nice day. No.
See ya. For real.
I mean, seriously, see you whenever I walk past your door.
Whenever I feel like it.
Girl. And it's and I'm finding too that especially the older they get, the more apparent that is, right? Yes. That like what I do, if I carry on a certain way, I sound pretty dumb then turning around and being like, you don't slam doors, and you don't, like, parents who curse their kids out.
Come on.
And then your kid turns around and says something back to you. what you gonna do? I mean, I know what I've seen people do, but is that fair? Like, is that, show respect? They talk a lot they talk a lot about different forms of discipline, and how, you have forms that are just first and foremost punitive, and you've done something wrong and now you're going to be punished.
Yeah.
And then you have other forms that are more emotion based, and helping your child to connect the dots and to understand what it is that they've done wrong in the context of, like, and how it ripples outward.
Yeah.
And so learning something like the golden rule is a big deal, because you learn, like, if I don't want that happening to me, then I shouldn't do it.
I shouldn't do it.
And if you don't show them what that means, and they're the ones in the world that you're supposed to love the most, how are you supposed to then, like, I always wonder about that. People who will treat their children really, really harshly.
Yeah, with disrespect.
With such disrespect. But they speak to them in a way that they would never speak to their friend or to their friend's kid, even if their friend's kid was over. Or like, what does that tell your child, that I can respect? I know what respect is. I demand it and I can show it, but I'm not showing it to you.
That renders what you're doing very ineffective. And I think you said it, you mentioned it briefly a little while ago. So interestingly enough, I found, when I was doing research on discipline, one of the things that came up was from the Ministry of Education in Guyana.
What?
And I had never done it. It was like one of the first things on my list. And I was like, wait.
Wow.
And it was really interesting, because I was like, well, okay. And then I thought, well, maybe that'll pop up on Danny's side too.
No.
It didn't. That's so funny, because I was like, I'm not even from Guyana, and we haven't really been researching it in far-eyed studies. So I don't know why it came up. But it was interesting, because this was from the Ministry of Education, right? And they were giving 3 types of discipline. Like for them, it was for the classroom, but I think this really applies, like, for parents in general, right? So the 3 types were preventative, supportive, and corrective, right? And what you mentioned earlier was the fact that, like, if your child doesn't understand, when a punishment is like punitive, like right away, like, you did it and I'm coming for you. If they don't understand the steps in between, then it's not fair. Because they're not going to learn the lesson, right? So what they're suggesting is, like, preventative discipline, which is clearly stated rules, goals, and I added expectations, right? So as a parent, like, what they're in trouble for should fall under, especially as they get older, it should fall under something that you've already taught them, like the golden rule, right? It should fall under something that they understand as a moral or a value already established in your home, and that you've reflected. And then the second one is supportive, which is, like, you get the verbal warning. Obviously, if it's not life or death, there's a verbal warning, like, listen, you did this. This is what you need to do to correct the behavior. If you don't correct the behavior, then this is what the consequences are.
Right.
So there's this is what I'm seeing what you did. I'm offering you a solution, and then I'm reminding you of the consequences.
Right.
And then the last one is corrective, right? And a lot of times as parents, we go from them doing it immediately to corrective behavior. Yes. And we haven't, and it might be something that, has a moral compass to it or something, but we still have to take the time to ensure that they completely understand what their options were. Like, you don't have to, like, so much harp on what they did wrong, but show them what they could have done that would have been a better choice. And then say, okay, and I warned you already, so here's the consequences that we've already discussed would happen if you violate this and this. And one of the things that they said is, getting into a verbal altercation with a child is almost always going to make you look bad. It's going to cause you to lose your respect level with the child, because you're going to say something that is going against what you're trying to teach them. And you're getting down into their level. You can't, like, they will try.
They will.
They will take you there.
Girl, and I feel like
Good
they
Lord.
know. I feel like they know once you're hooked in there and you're going, well, what I said was this. They kind of, there's like kind of a transition where they're like, I got you exactly where we can go on and on in this argument all day. Oh yeah, there's a smugness I'll call it that kind of comes out. I'll say with my teenager when I get to the zone where it can become a little combative in ways. Well, what I said was da-da-da. No, because mommy da-da-da, and we're going back and forth. I watch how it registers.
It just disintegrates.
Like 0 points for mommy at all. You're better off just saying because I said so. Like you're better off just doing that and waiting it out.
Right. Just let it slide.
Yeah. Don't argue with them.
Don't argue with them. What I find myself doing, because when you have a child with a certain personality where they really are curious and they do want to understand and they don't necessarily know when the best time is to have those conversations and to, I do find myself wanting to go there where I'm like, we're going to have this back and forth. And then I realize like, okay, I said what I said. And I'll say something to the effect of, I hear you. I understand that you don't like it, but this is how it is. Yeah. And that's what we're sticking with. If you say anything else other than okay, or I understand, I'm not going to respond to you anymore because I've already explained myself to you. I love you. I'm going to go in another room right now because we both need to cool off.
Do not follow me.
Do not follow me. And I know you're upset, but we'll deal with it later, Maybe after a snack or a nap or both.
I think that's an interesting point though too about like the different understanding who your child is and understanding who you are, like understanding, because for me I have to really think about what my triggers are, how I was disciplined and how that factors into how I am now. And and even factoring in the fact that some of the things about them that can drive me crazy, they came by it honestly. I gave it to them in abundance.
That was a gift. They came from me.
That's
a good point.
Girl, like, and I think this is where like I love my mother, because my mom understood all 4 of her children as individuals.
That's so
and my
beautiful.
Mom, girl, it's a massive gift, because my mom growing up, I could be testy. I was a good kid, but I could, I hate to say, but I did have a little lip. I had a little bit of lip. I had a lot of lip, girl. Like but it was because my mind was always going.
Something to say.
I had something to say. I had a lot of responsibility at a young age. And so I think that made me feel entitled to having a little opinion on God.
Well, and the truth is that you're extremely intelligent. You have an observant way of looking at life and at people. And you like, now that you're older, it's okay for you to be heard. Like we can talk about what's on your mind. Whereas when you're younger, a lot of times we're not given that option. And sometimes your parents don't have time for it. It's not the time.
It's not the time. I got 3 more of you and I got to go to work. You going to complain about dinner. Your room ain't clean. Like there's too much right now for me to argue with you. But what I love about her too, is that she recognized, and this is something I think is really important. And I take it with me as a mother. I'll take it with me as a grandmother, whatever. Like she said, don't stamp out things in your child that will serve them big time as an adult.
Exactly.
Like some of these things are there or are perfect defense mechanisms for them to have in this world, or strengths. And just because it's packaged in this little person with a limited view, they're not always going to be that little person with that little view. So that outspoken nature, like don't crush it. My mom used to always say that. Don't crush their spirit. Like let them be who they are. Show them how to balance that, because they are who they are. Like show them how to balance that, show them what the lines are, what the guidelines are, and show them tremendous love and help them learn how to self-regulate. Because when they get older, that outspoken nature might be the very thing that like sets your people free from Pharaoh. Okay. My mom was like, yeah.
That's the true ooh. And when you were saying that just now, I was just thinking about the Bible verse that said, don't provoke your children to anger.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is anger comes from a crushed spirit.
Yeah.
There's times when I've seen parents say things to their children and not even take a second thought about what they just said, and they're not looking at their child.
Yeah.
So they don't see how their face just went from like bright and excited to share something to like completely crushed.
Oh, it's the
and
worst
no,
thing.
They might not respond in anger in that moment. It's planted a seed.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's true.
One thing you can do is make sure you're looking at your child if you can when you're talking to them.
Oh yeah.
Make sure you're looking them in the eye.
Register with what they're experiencing. Definitely. I agree with that.
And because, you know, I know that there are children that can be manipulative,
mm-hmm.
but so many of them are coming from a pure place in these moments. And if we don't take the time to understand like why they made the decisions that they made and understand, I can think of so many instances where Farai has done something, and if I hadn't asked him why he did it and really went, now, why you do that? No, like really like help me understand why you did that, and given him the space to respond, I would not understand him as a human.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah. That's very true.
But those moments are so like amazing because I'll be like, oh baby, like it changes so much because he's very honest. He will tell on himself in a minute, but he'll tell you exactly where he's coming from.
Oh yeah. I do think that's super important. It helps you understand their thought process because they don't, I think that's one problem people make is like expecting children to be like little grown-ups. Like they're not grown-ups. They're
grown-up robots though.
Grown-up robots. Yeah. Do what I say. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Don't think. Like I'll tell you what to do. Or you should be able to compute these like big life themes that like you have no frame of reference to understand
for, and then assuming that when they do something wrong that it was malicious.
Right, like they had this whole Pinky in the Brain concoction in their mind
to take over the world. Pinky in the Brain.
First, my first plan to thwart Mother is that I will not brush my teeth. Like you don't have to handle them like they're staging a coup. Like they didn't brush their teeth. They don't like brushing their teeth half the time.
Brushing his teeth. He just doesn't. I don't know. It's it's nothing. It's nothing broken about him. He just doesn't like it.
Yeah, and really, if we all think about it, we like having fresh breath. But how many of us actually like the action of brushing our teeth?
If everyone liked it, they wouldn't have all these gadgets and things that you could do. Okay. There would be no inventiveness to that process if everyone just thought it was great.
Yeah.
There would be no toothbrushes for children with the Avengers on them and lights and things talking to them,
Exactly. There would be no need for my Oral-B toothbrush where I just put it on my tooth and it's like I
just bought him one of those. I just bought Fire one of those. It's so loud.
You don't even have to go like this. Just rub it against your teeth. Yeah. I mean,
so funny.
We act like they're like we're I mean, the key is just to teach them why certain things are important, to teach them about cause and effect, but to really sit and think that they are like, I was reading about how in some cultures, shaming is a tool used in discipline.
And they were saying, for you.
Say shaming, but it was interesting though when they explained, like as I kind of got into why certain cultures. So the idea
changed my mind. Come on.
Well, I still don't agree. I personally don't really like shaming, but it helped me understand it a little bit better.
Okay.
The idea that in Eastern cultures, that because the society tends to be more about the collective and less focus on just the individual,
okay.
then there's more shaming used because it's like, look at what you've done to the group, or you're not pulling your own weight
Done
amongst,
to your mother.
you know, you're gonna make like our family name, and you know, like it's there's more emphasis on upholding a certain code of conduct, because that conduct and those expectations are necessary for that society to function as a collective. And so shaming and guilt is a bigger deal. Like, and I do have friends.
Girl, you just made me, I'm thinking of friends that I've seen their mothers, like, I don't even want to say what culture they come from, but
that's
more
what
than
I
one
just
friend.
said. I said, let me not.
Yeah.
Let me not go into
diverse, but I've
it
had
is
more than one friend where I'm like, yeesh, like, because you left
it
your
is.
Toys out? Like, oh my gosh.
And I will say, you know, Eastern, but I'll also say, I would definitely mention Caribbean culture, because that is part of my culture. I will say that it exists there.
Yeah.
And so without shouting out other people from other places, because
starting your own house,
you know, I'll start in my own yard. So I'll say, like, you know, you look, when I grew up there, if I did something that was just outrageous, you better believe my mom would, I'm calling Auntie so-and-so and Auntie so-and-so and Auntie so-and-so and telling them all, you know, if you know what your niece did. Yeah. Girl. Yes. And I mean, I can't necessarily say though that harmed me, that form of shaming. I don't know if that was shaming. It's a form.
Oh, wait, no. Remember just last night, we were on the phone and I told you something about Farai, what he liked to eat.
Yes.
And he got upset. And now I'm thinking, because he holds you in high regard, right? That emotion that he was feeling must have been shame, but I didn't think that there was anything to be ashamed of.
This morning, I actually thought about that again. I thought about it, like it came back to my mind while I was actually brushing my teeth.
See, there goes the connection. Your Oral-B, you got one too.
I really did. I thought about it and I was like, I wonder why he felt a way about that. Because I didn't think that what you said was harmful or anything, but maybe he doesn't.
Because I was coming from a place of like, you know, if we're all out to eat, you know, I don't want to have to explain that to her.
I wonder if he perceives being I'll call it a selective eater as something that's maybe, because people do say it in ways that are not so nice.
And that could be very well my fault. I can think of two ways that's been a problem. I'll say from my side, okay, from what I've done, just saying, like, when he's like, I'm hungry, and me just giving a list of just a couple of things that we have here at the house that I know that he likes, and him saying something like, well, I kind of want something else, and me being like, well,
this what we got.
I don't know what else to give you, because you know, I'm not going to try to shove something down your throat that I know you don't like, and that doesn't necessarily satisfy the nutritional requirements of the day, you know. So that there's a chance that he feels that from me.
You know, it's an interesting.
Is this how this episode was supposed to go?
Tell me more. No, I mean, I will say though, like, honestly, part of what made me think of it is that Khalif doesn't like when I say he's a picky eater either.
Khalif is a grown man.
He's a grown man,
and he is selective.
And he's very selective about what he eats. And when I said it though, I didn't mean like when I put food on his plate, he turns his nose. He never does that. Anything I put on his plate, he'll eat. But he's very conscientious about what he eats. He's very conscientious about what he eats in terms of like the ecosystem and the food politics. So there are a lot of things. And he has a hard time eating fruit. which is not his fault. Like, so I
Yeah.
didn't mean it in any of those ways,
Right.
but he
Yeah.
doesn't like when I say that
When
at
you say
all.
it. And it's the
Right.
same with Farai. Like he's allergic to a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is a combination of, you know, his preference and like there's a lot of things that are not in his control, like his gag reflex when it comes to what he used to call it multi.
Mm-hmm.
It's malted, but it's like
Oh.
basically like wet foods. So like
Oh,
oatmeal, anything that's like runny like that, it triggers a gag reflex in him. And I
I
remember I was like that when I was younger
see.
too. It's
I
not,
see.
it could be the flavor, but it's also something like,
Yeah, textural. It's
yeah,
not
like if
cool.
like ice cream, if it starts to melt, he's done with it. So he doesn't even ask for ice cream anymore because like he'll eat a little bit, but once it starts to melt, it's
He
like,
doesn't want it.
yeah. So
Wow.
it's just,
Wow.
it's
You know?
interesting though. Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting too that, like, going back to the concept of like Eastern culture
Right,
and the
because that was
concept
a total
of
side note about the nutritional
well,
habits.
what's interesting about it though is that when you move to Western society where there's more emphasis on the individual and your self-empowerment and your self-esteem and what you can do, your creativity and all of that, it does cause us then to like look at things like shaming and guilting and stuff in an interesting way. Like that's
Mm,
an interesting cultural thing because I think I could think of a lot of people who'd be like, that's not shaming at all. I'll tell you what shaming is. Shaming is when you get
mm-hmm.
a 90 on your, algebra test and your cousin is an AP and has like 100 plus because he got all the what are the bonus questions, right?
Right.
And your mom, sends everybody a copy of your report card or your what, like I've heard people, the levels of competition that were fostered and the
Mm,
shaming that was fostered in the house
mm-hmm.
was so heavy that some people really like had severe depression at a very young age and this serious pressure to
Yeah.
perform, and that if they didn't perform or if they didn't get the optimal, not even like there was no such thing as like, well, everybody else in the class failed the test, I got a B. It's like a B is not good enough. Like this feeling that there's this ceiling that keeps getting higher and higher no matter how high you climb.
Yeah. And you can never be, you're never enough.
You're never enough, and not only are you never enough, but you will always be told and proven to be not enough
Not
to the
enough.
people around you with
Yeah.
shame and guilt. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
it's interesting culturally how like they're different, how like for us
Mm-hmm.
we can look at like, oh man, I wonder if I shamed him by mentioning his dietary
Mm-hmm.
selectiveness.
Right.
Where in other cultures it's like you can catch licks in front of your whole family, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
at 16,
Yep.
and that's it,
That's just what it is.
and in front of your cousins
It's
who are laughing.
yeah. And like it's interesting because I still, even when I look at that in other cultures, and I guess because you know how we're raised here and what we're surrounded with here, um and I've seen all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but I still feel like whenever it hurts a deep part of that person and it doesn't produce like a better behavior,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want you to behave better just to make me happy. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to behave better because it's good for you and it's going to bring you lasting results later. I
Yeah,
mean, as
yeah.
you know, some things that children, making up your bed and picking up your dishes after you're finished eating,
Mm-hmm.
like that's just one of those things that later on he'll be like, okay, it's part of the life that I live.
Yeah.
I don't see how making someone feel like they can't ever get it right is going
Mm-hmm.
to be effective in
Right.
discipline.